I'm going to try not to stare at the viewfinder. I'm going to try and look at you guys. Um, this is going to be new. Hello, I'm back after nearly 2 years of not making any videos. It's been nearly 2 years for like a myriad of reasons. Main one being that I sort of just, I guess, lost a bit of oomph for doing this. But also my camera died, so now I have a new camera and I have a microphone. So this could be either really good or really bad because I might be blowing out the audio right now. I don't know. But anyway, what better for my first video back when I decided, hey, I might give this, a second shot than to do a best books of 2024, because the last one of these I did was the best books of 2022. So yes, that's why it's been 2 years. Right, so in 2024 I read 52 books, and surprisingly very few of them got 5 stars from me. A lot of them got 4 stars, but there weren't that many that like actually wowed me, and that's the first year since getting out of my reading slump after university where I haven't had books that I've like absolutely adored. I think unlike the last couple of times I did this where there wasn't really an order, I just listed the 10 that I liked the most. I actually have put my books in an order this time, so we're going to go from my like 10th favourite all the way to my favourite. The book in my number 10 slot of top 10 reads of 2024 was The Survivors by Jane Harper. This is the third Jane Harper book I read. I've also read The Dry and Lost Man, and I've loved all 3 of them. This one is probably my least favourite out of the 3, but that's still a really high bar. So The Survivors is a thriller, as is I think all of Jane Harper's work. This is set in a small town on the island of Tasmania, and this seems to be like a running theme with Jane Harper's work, which I'm not complaining about because this is a trope that I enjoy, which is people returning to their small town after a certain amount of time, and normally there is a tragic reason why they left in the first place, and that's no different in The Survivors. This is a story of Kieran, who returns to his small town in Tasmania where he grew up, with his girlfriend and their new baby, to help his mum like pack up her house because his father has dementia, so he's moving into a home and then she is going to be moving closer to wherever that home is. Whilst they're there, a girl that is sort of, she's there almost as a tourist, she's staying there for the summer, got a job and all that stuff, turns up dead on the beach. And it's following, trying to figure out what happened to her, whether she drowned, whether someone killed her, and at the same time it's bringing up a lot of memories for something that happened to Kieran when he was younger, and you're like piecing together both stories at the same time, which I think is something that Jane Harper does very, very well. I just went into my reading challenge to find out the name of this author because I listened to it as an audiobook and I don't have a physical copy, and I believe at the beginning of this I said I read 52 books in 2024. That's a lie. I read 56. I just apparently forgot 4 of them. So number 9 on the top 10 books of 2024 for me is That Bone-Setter Woman by Frances Quinn. This is set in the... is it Jacobean period? No. Edwardian? My cat's just walked in. Hello, baby. This is a book set in Edwardian London, which is something that I'm not... I read a lot of stuff in like the Regency era and in Victorian England, not a lot in like Edwardian times. Sorry, there is a cat here. Say hello. You want to say hello? No? Anywho, distraction. It's set in Edwardian London, and it follows Endurance Proudfoot. I mean, quite a name. Who her name is short to Jury, who comes to London from, I think, Surrey. Can't really remember. Her hometown wasn't like a big part of this. With her sister, when her sister because her sister has got herself into a little bit of trouble. So her family have sent both of them away to London so that her sister can have her baby and give it up for adoption, and like their good name won't be besmirched. Jury goes with her despite the fact that she doesn't want to, mostly to look after her sister, because her sister, everyone thinks her sister's like a bit ditzy and a bit simple. She's actually incredibly shrewd, and she's a little bit silly, but that kind of changes. Whilst there, Jury, who has always wanted to follow in her father's footsteps and become a bone setter, which is like an old-timey kind of chiropractor, osteopath, physiotherapist type person, and was never allowed to because she's a girl. When she is in London, she decides, hey, I'm in a new place, this is a big city, people do things differently here, I'm going to try being a bone setter, and she becomes like a great bone setter and very well renowned. I am struggling with words. Yeah, it was a lovely story. It was one of those things that where there, despite the fact that there were people that did bad things, and there were some characters that you could consider like the villain, none of these characters were villainous particularly. There were people that did bad things, but because you saw things from different people's POVs, you understood like why they were doing it, and even if you didn't agree with what they were doing or why they or how they were going about it, then what I'm trying to say is none of these characters were super dislikable, and I really enjoyed that. My foot has gone dead. So yes, that was a very nice read. I think I read it in the summer. It felt like a summery book. The next book I read, I borrowed from the library, so again, I don't have a physical copy, but I would like to get a copy. It's also the only non-fiction book on this list, yes. So at number 8 is Lowborn, Growing Up, Getting Away, and Returning to Britain's Poorest Towns by Kerry Hudson. This is a memoir from Kerry Hudson, who is an author that I'd never heard of before. This is the only book of hers I've heard of. So this is a memoir because Kerry Hudson grew up incredibly poor. She grew up in and around the poorest towns in Britain. Her and her mother moved about an awful lot, and this is sort of told almost in 2 parts that run simultaneously. It's the story of Kerry growing up and the different places she lived, and intermixed with her then returning to those places as an adult to see how they've changed and how they've not, as she's trying to reckon with the things that happened to her as she was growing up. Some things that are unfortunately like a byproduct of abject poverty and growing up in towns that are not affluent at all, so there aren't really the safety systems or safety nets put in place. And other things that she endured happened because her mother was like with abusive men, or her mother wasn't super mentally well, and neither, as a result of this, Kerry also has an awful lot of like trauma that she's unpacking by going back to these places and sort of like reshaping them in her mind. It's a very like heartfelt portrayal of some of these places that, having grown up in England my whole life, I mean, I came from a working class background, however I understand that working class in the Cotswolds, which is where I grew up and where I still sort of live, the Cotswolds is a very affluent county. So working class in the Cotswolds is different to working class, say, on the borders of Scotland, like in Glasgow, up in Manchester, and places like that, where the breadline is like even more extreme. So hearing, yeah, it was incredibly interesting to hear about. That was a really terrible description of this book. It was another 4 stars. I often find it hard to rate memoirs because like that's someone's life experience, but yeah, I still gave it 4 stars. Number 7 on the list is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This was my pick for. I'm part of 2 book clubs. I probably should have said the Bone Setter Woman. That Bone Setter Woman was a book club pick for my roller derby book club, which is, as the name suggests, it's a book club made up of people on my roller derby team. This book was my pick for the horror book club that I'm part of. So we read horrors and thrillers and stuff. I've been wanting to read Pretty Girls for ages because I've heard a lot of things about like the brutality of it and how like dark it is and stuff like that. This was a 4 star for me. I did very much enjoy it. it, despite how chunky of a book this is, it flew by. I did listen to this on audiobook, so that made it even faster because I listened to audiobooks at 2 times speed. But Pretty Girls this is the first Karen Slaughter book I've read, but I would read more from her after reading this. What are you doing? It was a thump. Give me a second. Yeah, so Pretty Girls follows a woman whose husband has just very recently passed away. He was murdered in I was going to say a hold-up. It's not right. They were like mugged, and the mugging went wrong, and her husband unfortunately died. So, but while she is going through his effects and like his computer and everything, trying to get everything together and find, I think she's looking for documents for like his will and stuff like that. She stumbles upon some videos of an incredibly graphic and violent nature, which don't mesh with the gentle and very put together man that she knew. And she sort of falls down a rabbit hole of finding out that the man she was married to was nothing like what she thought, and he's in fact part of a depraved syndicate that specializes in snuff films, is what I'll say. So yeah, it's a crime thriller. It was just as brutal as I was anticipating. It was incredibly fast-paced, which is really good for these kinds of thrillers, I think. There was like no room to breathe, but that didn't feel terrible. Sometimes if the intensity is too much, you become a bit numb to it. That didn't happen here. There were enough ups and downs that meant that it still felt tense the entire time. There were a few moments where my suspension of disbelief was broken for a second, but I was enjoying the ride enough that it didn't bother me that much. Number 6, we're nearly halfway there, and I've only talked for 18 minutes because I'm rusty at this. Anyway. Number 6 on this top 10 list, and something I probably should have anticipated because I'm fairly certain every book I've read by this author has been like one of my top 10 of the year that I've read that book in. That is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. This is the 4th book in the Wayfarers series. They are connected, all of the books in the series, but very loosely. They have some recurring characters, but you can read them completely separately. So I will, normally if I'm talking about like a book in a series, I will only talk about the first one, so I'm not spoiling anything. However, because of that, I can talk about this book by itself. So The Galaxy and the Ground Within is a sci-fi, as all Becky Chambers books are, set on a like way station planet. So it's a planet that has no life sort of on its own. It's kind of like just a barren rock. However, it's perfectly situated right next to I'm going to say like a series of wormholes that have been set up to like travel stations, basically. Most of the space travel in this happens through wormholes that are tightly controlled and regulated. So this planet itself exists almost like a floating hotel with different little homesteads on it, where travelers who are waiting for their spot to like jump through the wormhole can come down for an hour to replenish the supplies, or they can stay the night, or anything like that. It's set in one of these little homesteads where you have a cast of different species of aliens, as it is with most of Becky Chambers' books as well, especially in the Wayfarer series, who are all in this one homestead, refueling, replenishing, planning to stay for different amounts of time. When something happens up above them, I think one of the satellites breaks, which makes it too dangerous for landed spacecraft to go up and use the gates. And the gates are like shut down for a while. So all of a sudden, these people that have never met, they're different species. Some of the species have like history with each other, even if the people themselves don't. And it's all about them sort of coming together, even though there's no like imminent danger. They're all well protected and everything, but their plans have all suddenly changed, and they're all stuck in this small space together, and they've got to be together for however long, it's going to take for this satellite to be fixed. And they all learn more about each other. are shown some of their prejudices and stuff like that. The thing with Becky Chambers books is that they're not always super plot heavy, and I'm not saying that as a negative at all. What Becky Chambers does, which I absolutely love, is she'll take like a premise and then use it to speak about a part of the human condition. For example, her other series, the Monk and Robot series, this is the first one, A Psalm for the Wild Bill, has a very sort of like, I'm going to say paper thin plot about a person meeting a robot in the wilds and yada yada. I'm not going to go into it. But the actual whole series is really about finding your purpose and also at sometimes realizing that you don't need a purpose to be worth something. You don't have to provide a service to be worth food and shelter and to be loved and looked after. My favourite one in the Wayfarer series, which is book number 3, A Record of a Spaceborne Few, is all about how human beings work best when we survive best, work best, thrive best when we work as a community and when we look after each other and stuff like that. So this is very similar when it's you can never fully understand someone who is not from the same background as you unless you spend time with them and ask them questions and share with each other, and that's what The Galaxy and the Ground Within was about. Number 5. Number 5 is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This is another book that's been on my TBR for so long, and I finally got around to it. I'm actually annoyed that I read this in 2024 because in another video I'm going to go through my Storygraph reading challenges that I'm doing for 2025. And one of the reading challenges is to read a book from Iceland or about Iceland, and that is what this book is about. So, and I'm not going to read it again only like 3 months later. But anyway, Burial Rites is set in Iceland in 1829, and follows. It's like based loosely on a true story. It's about the last woman to be given the death penalty in Iceland, and it follows. So that the woman in this story was a real woman. She was given the death penalty. The crime that she committed in this book is the crime that she was recorded as committed and everything. However, this takes that and does what I think a lot of based on true story things does, but in a very sympathetic and lovely way, where you follow this woman from being caught and sentenced to when her sentence is taken out, which is like a year later or quite a few months later, and also the family that she is placed with while she is waiting for her sentence. Because Iceland was not a place that did the death penalty a lot, they didn't have things necessarily set up to house someone who was basically on death row. So what they did was they placed this woman with a farming family, and basically said, you can put her to work while she's waiting for her sentence, but you've got to look after her. And so it starts with the family being very unhappy with this because they don't want to murder us in their house, and she must be, possessed by the devil and all that stuff. But whilst she's there, you see this family and this woman growing closer together, and you find out more about why she did what she did, or if she even did what she did, and her past as she grew up and everything like that. And it was lovely. One of the things I actually really enjoyed was the fact that Iceland as a country was almost like a character itself in this. It was very beautifully written, and I didn't cry. I got very close to it in the last 20 pages. I very nearly cried. But it was very emotional and very beautiful. Number 4 of the top 10 books I read in 2024 is Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. This was another of the Royal Derby Book Club books. This was one that I picked because it had been on my TBR for ages and I really wanted to read it. This is basically a Mulan retelling. However, instead of the main character hiding as a boy and joining the army, the main character hides as a boy and goes to the Imperial Palace to try and become the Emperor's tailor, because the Emperor has just taken a new bride and he is holding a competition of sorts to find out who is the best tailor in the land. And to find out who the best tailor is, he's setting a series of tasks, like they have to make a dress out of paper and paint it and everything like that. They've got to, I think they were like forming shoes out of gold and stuff. It was sort of magical realism set in Imperial China, not actual Imperial China. It's not actually China. It's fantasy China. I thought this was a standalone. It's not. It's actually the first in a duology, I believe. I now have the second one, and I will be reading it this year. If I get through my TBR, I say, as I look at my overflown TBR cart, on which the sequel to this is not currently on. Anywho, as soon as I found out that this was a duology, I was like, I need to get the second one because I need to know what happens. Right. So the next two books are the first in a series, and I read the entirety of both series in 2024, but I said you're only allowed to put one book on each series in this list, otherwise my top 10 list would exist of basically 3 books. Number 3 and the last 4-star on this list, we again tell that I had a kind of reading year in 2024 in that only the top 2 have 5 stars, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. I was just about to go into a thing. The entirety of this series were 4 stars each time, probably like 4.5 actually. The book, or series should I say, in third place is Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation by Mojang Tongzhu. I have wanted to read something by Mojang Tongzhu for ages. I have all of her series now. I don't have the entirety of Heaven Official's Blessing, and I also have not read that. I was leaving that till last because it's the longest series and it's 8 books long. Take a breath. This is a 5-book series. Each book, as I said before, is 4 to 4.5 stars. This is my first Danmei novel that I've ever read, which I am surprised it took me this long. This was also my first foray into like the world of cultivation as like a concept. I didn't know that about this world. But this follows, I am sorry, I'm probably going to butcher these names. I am trying. There is a pronunciation guide at the back of each of these books, and I have been studying it, but I am bad at names. So I apologize, I'm trying. This follows the story of Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji. Wei Wuxian, literally, this is not a spoiler, it happens in the first page of the book. Wei Wuxian died 13 years ago. He was killed by his cultivation brothers because he went down the demonic cultivation path. The beginning of this book, he wakes up in a new body. Someone has summoned him to get their revenge on the family that has wronged them. So he is now in someone else's body, and he's had a second lease at life. So he's decided, okay, fine, I will do this person's bidding, and then I can live my merry life. No one will know who I am. However, that plan gets scuppered instantly when the house he has been sort of reborn into. I say reborn, he's born into the body of a 20-something-year-old. I don't think they ever actually say what Mo Jianyu's age was. Mo Jianyu is the man that sacrificed himself to bring Wei Wuxian back, and is the person who basically asked Wei Wuxian to get his revenge for him. Anyway, so, however, Wei Wuxian wakes up in this house, which is possessed by a vengeful spirit, and this is what cultivators do. They help get rid of spirits and monsters and things like that. So he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I gotta figure this out. And whilst he's doing that, a group of youths or juniors from the Lan clan of Guzu, Guzu, that one I don't know how to pronounce, appear, and so does Lan Wangji, who Wei Wuxian was convinced when they were children together and young teenagers together, he was convinced Lan Wangji hated him. That is not the case. But he also knows that Lan Wangji, if anyone is going to know that this person is not Mo Jianyu and is in fact Wei Wuxian brought back from the dead, it's going to be him. So he tries to run away, and that doesn't happen. And the entirety of the series is, you get 2 different timelines. You get the timeline of Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji as they are now, trying to unravel a mystery of that all started in the house that he wakes up in, and then it goes back to what happened to lead up to Wei Wuxian being murdered. So it's like a mystery wrapped in a love story wrapped in mystery. And also, I do have to say, I feel like Lan Wangji is such a like Darcy coded character. I absolutely love it. So many people try and write like a Mr. Darcy as a love interest in their books, and they don't get it right. They end up writing, in my opinion, they tend to end up writing a Wickham instead of a Darcy. Lan Wangji is the perfect Mr. Darcy because he is outwardly cool and aloof and like all put together, and he is inwardly screaming the entire time, and that is a perfect. It's also, this is like the perfect sort of sunshine character and like cold aloof character, or should I say black cat and golden retriever. I really enjoyed them as a couple and as just a pair as well, who are getting into mischief together. Take It is like that entire series is number 3 on my list. Number 2, and my first 5-star of the year. This entire series was a 5-star for me, and it is another Mojang Ponju book, and that is The Scumvillain's Self-Saving System. I adored this series. It was so funny. It was hilarious. And again, I have Heaven Official's Blessing on my shelf, and that is the last Mojang Tongju series for me to read. And I have found that like there is a lot of miscommunication that happens in these books. With Wei Wuxian, it's because he is just oblivious to everything. He has no, like, Lan Wangji could be holding up a sign that says "I love you and I want to have your babies," and Wei Wuxian would be like, "Oh, I wonder who that's for." He's just completely oblivious. The thing that was so funny about this one is that I'm just going to call him Shen Yan because that was what his name was before he transmigrated, which I will explain in a second. Because Shen Qingke? No. Shen King, yeah, King. I can't pronounce the name of the character he becomes, so Shen Yan is what I'm going to call him. This person here. He's not. He's just in denial the entire time. It's really funny. He's such an unreliable. They both are. Him and Wei Wuxian are both unreliable narrators, so I'm assuming that this is a theme, and that Zhe is also going to be an unreliable narrator. I don't know what the reasoning for that will be, but anyway, the story of Scumvillain's Self-Saving System is that the main character Shen Yan, this seems to be a theme as well. He dies before the book starts, and he dies because he's just finished an epic online cultivation novel called The Proud Immortal Demon Way, and he was so angry with the way it ended and just the book itself that he died. So, yes. And when he wakes up, he has been transmigrated into the story of Proud Immortal Demon Way as Shen King. I'm so sorry. Who just so happens to be the like main villain of that story, and as someone who has just finished reading the entire Behemoth, he knows this very well, that he is going to be doomed to the most painful and like humiliating death at the hands of Proud Immortal Demon Way's protagonist, Luo Binghe, who is this little cherub here. I'm calling him a cherub. He is no such thing. The protagonist. So the story of like Proud Immortal Demon Way is that Shen Qingke is Luo Binghe's shizun or teacher, and he basically torments and abuses him his entire life. And so when Luo Binghe becomes the golden haloed protagonist and super powerful, completely immortal demon god of this world, he decides, you know what, you were really shitty to me when I was a child, so I'm going to tear you limb from limb and leave you as nothing but a stick. Yeah. And so Shen Yan knows what his fate is, and he's desperate to not have that. However, as part of like the transmigration deal, he has to deal with a thing called the system, which is almost like part of like a video game, and he is not, especially initially, he is not allowed to be out of character. If he does something like be nice to Luo Binghe, he will lose points and he could just die anyway. So he has to build up points by doing things correctly and completing missions and stuff like that. And if he gets enough points, he can like turn off the out of character thing and act however he wants, which I thought was actually going to be more of a thing than it was. He got over that pretty damn quickly. But so he's like, right, fine. The only way I can get away from this is if I be really nice to Luo Binghe and I become like an actual good teacher and I look after him and everything like that. So he does. He raises Luo Binghe in like a loving situation, which then backfires on him when Luo Binghe falls madly in love with him, and Shen Yan does not realize this because, like I said, he's in denial. He's in denial about his own feelings. He's also so blinded by the fact that he knows how this story goes because he's just read it. He doesn't realize that him changing the narrative will change the narrative. That him saving characters that like die in the book means that they're there now. Him not doing things that the original Shenkinka did means that things are going to change. So when things aren't going the way that he's like, wait, no, this should have happened already, or no, wait, this is happening way too fast, it doesn't like click in his brain that he is the reason for it. And also his inner monologue is so funny because he is also outwardly stoic, and he says it himself a couple of times. He's like mastered the poker face. He can appear completely unaffected by everything, and yes, and because we are in his mind, we are from his POV, you see just how much he is internally screaming the entire time. And I have to say, I very much enjoy that. And just because I can see my camera flashing at me, the battery is like very close to dying. We're going to see if we can get this one done before the battery dies. Number one, the best book I read in 2024, this 5-star, and I can't wait to continue the series. I also shouldn't have been surprised because everything I've read by this author has been a 5-star so far. So yeah, the last book on this list is Wolf Song by TJ Klune, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get through this before the battery dies because I loved this. I adored this book. It's a big boy, and it only took me as long to get through it as it did because it was one of those where I was enjoying it so much I kept having to put it down. Kept having to walk away from it because if I just sat and read it, then it would be over, and I didn't want that to happen. This is like, I think, the first ever werewolf book I've read where I've read books with werewolves in them before, but I've never read a book where werewolves are like the main thing. This is also the first of TJ Klune's adult books that I read. I read Under the Whispering Door and The House in the Cerulean Sea before, which are his middle grade books, and they were beautiful and gorgeous. 5 stars, loved them. So I was excited to see how he would go and write an adult book. But the fact that I started this and I had put it on my in my like library collection as a young adult. No, as a middle grade. This is not a middle grade at all. There are 2 quite explicit like sex scenes in this. But this follows the story of Ox, who has lived in this small, I don't know if it says what the state is, but he's lived in a small town called Green Creek. This is the Green Creek series. Why was that so difficult to say? I have 2 of the other books in the series, and I will be reading them as soon as I possibly can. Anyway, he's lived there all his life, and he's a very quiet boy. He thinks he's quite dumb and lumbering, and that he's not really good for much, and that's his father's fault. His father leaves him when he's quite young, but that doesn't particularly matter that much. I mean, he still lives with his mum, and his mum is amazing. But he has a paternal role model in a man called Gordo, who runs the mechanic shop that his father used to work at, and who Ox then goes to work for. And so he's not lacking. He's got like a good paternal figure, and then the house that's always been empty since he's been growing up suddenly has a family in it. And he meets them, and the youngest member of that family takes like an instant liking to him. and so Ox becomes basically an honourable member of this family. So when he finds out they're werewolves, he sort of just takes it in his stride, to be honest. He's there like, oh, okay, this might as well happen. I still love you guys. You aren't gonna hurt me, and you love me, so meh. You're wolves. I'll keep your secret. Great. And it's just lovely. There is like a heavier plot in that there's like another wolf pack, or there's another wolf who has some people who are not really. There's a whole thing about like pack and family and how important these familial ties and loving ties and everything are to just human beings and wolves at the same time. And it's just, that's the thing, it's all so lovely. It's all about connection and love and looking after each other and being there for each other, and how pack is like how even us as humans, how we should be like, we should look after each other. And yeah, I don't know how to go into it more without spoiling things, but I loved it. So yeah, those were my top 10 best reads of 2024. I'm hoping 2025 will, not that I didn't love those books, but I'm hoping to have more 5 stars in 2025. That is that's my goal. I'm also hoping to get better at this, and get back into the flow of actually talking to a camera. And I hope that I haven't blown up the audio too much by having a microphone that I don't know how close or far away I should be having it. I also should probably not talk whilst I'm doing this, because I imagine this is not great. Anyway, I don't know how often I'll be filming or anything like that, but I am trying to get back into this properly, and I have other video ideas in my head. So 2025, I have a lot of things I want to do in 2025. Read better books, move house, make more videos. So I hope everyone's having a lovely day. Be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and I will see you